Hello everyone, today I want to introduce to you two new functions in Excel 2016, or you can find it also in Office 365, the unique function and the filter function. To be very honest, after I learned about those two formulas, I don't feel it's too impressive because the function they can realize, for example, the filter one, you choose a different function selection and then different fields pop up. There's nothing that you cannot realize with just pivot table and slicer in the older version of Excel. However, I still choose to introduce them to you because there are two major advantages of those two functions over the pivot table and slicer. One is that instead of having it in a pivot table format, which is a bit restrictive in terms of how it looks and where it is, those two formulas allow you to simply input the summary and the data reports in the range right in the Excel table, which means that you can format it more easily, you can rename it more easily, and you can just drag it around more easily. So that is a very good thing, especially if you are trying to build some kind of reports, summaries, or dashboards. The second advantage for the new two functions is the size. So you can tell that I have two files using exactly the same data table, and one has a dashboard in with the two functions, and one has a dashboard in pivot table and slicer, and you can tell that the pivot table one is larger. The gap here is small, but just think about when you have an enormous size of data table, then the pivot table size will get huge, if you know what I meant. But with the formula, you are still able to contain it to a smaller size, which is very important in Excel for data analytics because it allows your Excel to run much faster. So my conclusion is that I don't favor one way over the other, but I think it's still worth learning about those two functions in the new Excel. So I'm going to introduce you how to use those two formulas to recreate those two tables. And at the last part of the video, if you're still interested in learning, I'm going to also show you how to use pivot table, how to create the pivot table and the slicer that I have here. Okay, so now let's get started. Okay, so now first let's look at the data table. So we have a very simple employee data table with performance rating and their departments. And I want to produce two reports. One is the head count by department, straightforward. And the other one is actually a filter table, which is depending on the person's performance rating, I want to be able to just select the rating, and then the table will show me all the employees with all the information, but with just that performance rating. So, okay, so let's first start from the one that we use unique. So to do that, first you create your title to be wherever you want for this table. And then in your cell, this is where you use the unique function. So you type in unique, choose the array, which is the department in our case. It's all the departments here, and then just close the bracket. That's it. And then you can tell it's actually showing all the unique records for our department records. And then for the head count, we actually use COUNTIF for this purpose. So COUNTIF, we want to count our range of the department, which is column F, and our criteria is that it equals to the sales. Close it. And here we go, we have the data ready. And then the last thing we need to do here is just to put in the total and then go outer equal, and then you get the sum of it. And then the last thing you do is really just format it. So I'm going to save time because I already have the format here. I'm just going to copy the format, and then here we go. That's how we create this summary table. Okay, so how do we create this one using the filter? So again, to create this, we need to create this drop-down table. So in order to do that, it's actually also quite straightforward. I'm gonna copy the performance rating. This one I'm going to highlight as yellow. And then for the input, I'm going to go to data validation, allow a list. And then in the source, I'm going to choose to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to constrain my input. So now when you go for each number, it's going to show what it is. And then I'll and then I want to format it in a way that I want. And then the next step I need to do is to just copy the table titles that I need. So in my case, it's actually exactly the same as the old title. I just format it in a way that I want, and I just copy it here, make sure I show everything. And then what you do is actually in like just underneath your table, use the formula of filter. And then what you need to do here is first select the columns that you want to use. So for example, this is an employee ID. I'm going to use the employee ID in my original data table. So I select my range, and then I go comma, and then include. Include is where we show the criteria. So for us, the criteria range is the performance range, performance rating. So we select the performance rating column. Make sure you have you use F4 to make an absolute value, and then make it equal, and it equals to whatever drop down value it is, and make sure you also make it absolute, because we're gonna drag the formula across to show the full record. And then basically that's it, and then just close your bracket, and here you go. So you will actually have those records filtered here. And then let's try a different rating, and then you can see that there's the different ratings for 3 that we need here. And then the best part about that is that you don't need to do this for every single column that you have. You just simply drag the formula, because you have made sure that when you drag the formula, copy the formula down, it's gonna copy the first row, the first column to the right, but then your criteria, which is the performance rating and the performance rating selection, will stay the same. So that you just simply drag it over, and here you go. So that's pretty much done. And then when you select the right performance rating, then you get whatever records that you need. Then the last thing you need to do is just format it in a way that you want, which I will just save my time and do it in this way. And then here you go. So this is pretty much it. So that's the new way of how to do it in Excel. Okay, so after learning about the new way, let's just look at the traditional pivot table and slicer way of how to do this. So let's first create the pivot table. You select all the data that you need, go insert pivot table. It's almost normally gonna default you to a new worksheet, but I'm like, I don't want it. Like I just want it to be on an existing worksheet. So I select a cell in here. And then you can see my pivot table is actually somewhere here. And then what I need to do is to drag my departments and then make sure I count my employee ID, not sum. And here we go. So basically this is my summary for my pivot table. Actually to note that you might be able to also change the title of your pivot table if you want. Yeah, but there's but it's usually like more restricted in terms of the format. Okay, so that's how you do the count. And then the next one that we want to do is actually to create this filtered slicer for our performance rating. So in order to do that, actually, my preferred way is you can either copy an existing pivot table or you just create a new one. Let's create a new one, existing worksheet. Let's say I want to put it here. Okay, so that's my new pivot table. What I actually need to do here is a little bit more manual. So I actually need to drag all my fields into the row because I'm showing all the information here. So just first drag them. This might be more painful if you have more columns than I do. Okay, and then yeah, and then it's gonna look like this. It's okay. Now you just go to design. For the report layout, go show it in Tableau, and then remove all the subtitles, subtotals, and then here we go. So this is how the data looks like. So we basically replicate this data table, but in a pivot table format. And the reason that we want to do it this way is that so that we can insert the slicer. So now the table is here. One thing I don't like about pivot table is like every time you insert it, it kind of automatically adjusts the width, and then you have to go to pivot table option, make sure it doesn't auto-fit on updates of data, and then you still kind of have to reformat your title and everything. Okay, so now anyhow, let's add the slicer. So to do that, you go to pivot table, analyze, insert slicer, and we're gonna choose performance rating. Go okay, this is how it looks like, and we were like, we don't want it to look like this, so we go to column, and then we choose to have 5 columns, go enter, and then it's gonna adjust the format to be like presented horizontally, so it's slightly pleasant to watch. So you can choose your 3, you can choose your 2, you can choose your rating. And actually, it's easier in pivot table and slicer in a sense that if you want to select multiple selections, so let's say I want to select both rating 2 and 3, what I need to do is simply click on 2, press Control, and then 3, and I'm showing both 2 and 3. This is something that the filter function can also realize, but it requires more tricks to it. So actually, I actually pretty like the slicer function a lot. So I think it's still useful. I'm not gonna like say they are phasing away, but I think it's still cool to know that there's an alternative way to do it. So that's it. Okay, so that is everything I want to share with you today. I hope that you find it helpful.